Alright, hello everybody, my name is Christian Garcia and today I will be presenting a persuasive speech. Now I'd like to start off by asking a question. How would you feel if I told you that your vote does not count as much as it used to in this country? Some might say that we're already at that point. Well, today I'll be presenting why we should overturn the Citizens United ruling. And the answer is yes, we should. The Citizens United ruling was just a bad one that our country made, and it moved us towards the wrong direction in our future. Not only affecting us now, but affecting our kids and their kids possibly. Now, some of the main points I'll be covering in this persuasive speech would be some of the causes and effects of the Citizens United ruling, give as context as to why it was a bad ruling, and provide a possible solution as to how we can fix this problem. Now, going on to my first point, the main point, I'd like to start off by giving a little bit of context from the case. The 2010 Supreme Court case of Citizens United versus Federal Election Committee stated that money is protected under the First Amendment right, and that corporations, unions, and other figures alike can unlimitedly donate or give money to political expenditures, meaning they can give money to their favorite candidates or to their favorite party, as long as it's done independently, right? So, subpoint A would just basically describe that this court ruling was not a good one. It opened the floodgates for money to corrupt our politicians, and now we have politicians doing the biddings of the rich rather than helping out the poor and working class communities. Now, political funding and donations have risen extremely in the past 5 years since the ruling. Now, just to give an example, the 2012 the presidential election, was the most politically funded in U.S. history. Super PACs and other elites donated to the sum of over $1 billion, which was unheard of at the time, surpassing the past record, which was $500 million in the George Bush election of 2004. And this can all be correlated back to the Citizens United ruling in 2010. Now, moving on to my second point, which is to give some context as to the causes and effects of this case. Now, the views of money equaling free speech and being protected under the First Amendment has gone back all the way to the 1970s. First being seen or brought up to the scene in the Virginia Board of Pharmacy versus Virginia Consumer Council of 1976, in which the Board of Pharmacy argued for corporate rights or corporate personhood and allowing them to set prices at which they pleased and also advertise their medications to the people of Virginia. This ultimately won and moved us in a direction where corporations and unions had more rights under being labeled as people. Now, the case preceding that was the Buckley versus Vallejo case of 1978. And in that case, it was argued that money equals free speech, so corporations shouldn't be withheld to limited amounts of political expenditures or political donations. And this case actually won and labeled money as equaling free speech. Therefore, it shot down some laws created specifically to defend against corruption in political elections made during the Nixon administration, specifically the Watergate scandal, which was a huge scandal back in the 60s, 70s. And this Buckley versus Vallejo case struck down many laws made to protect citizens and average people from elites being able to run the elections, basically by donating large sums of money. And now up to now, when Justice Anthony Kennedy, he was one of the judges who had a major say in the Citizens United ruling, stated that now that money equals constitutes free speech, corporations have the ability to make unlimited amounts of donations or to their favorite political expenditures because they have personhood. And that money, I quote, does not even lead to corruption or give the appearance of corruption. This was surprising to say, for a judge to say back in 2010 when this was passed. And we can see how the settlements of the 70s cases, the cases from 1970, led over to this one, which was more recent. Now, what did this do? Well, some of the effects of this were that more and more people were able to, more and more corporations had sway with the elections and had more power just by the power of their dollar, basically. And just to give one example, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah back in 2012, when he was running for re-election, was actually backed by huge pharmaceutical companies in which they donated over $750,000 to his political organization. And it's believed that the ads made against his opponent, who argued for more liberal and more democratic-leaning viewpoints, were struck down, and he ended up winning the re-election. And many might say that the political contributions of the pharmaceutical company didn't affect his decision-making once he was in office, but on the contrary, it was actually seen a year after he took office. He passed a major pharmaceutical bill that helped pharmaceutical companies in Utah, which many people opposed. But since the companies donated over $750,000 to his organization, they had a little bit more say in that. So now moving on to the third and final point, which would be that what are some solutions? Some might argue that there are no solutions. This is too difficult to do. It's just the way it is. And I might say, well, there have been many other civil rights movements, other laws that have been amended. To give example, the 14th Amendment, which gave slaves their rights, which was a huge battle from the Civil War. Not easy, but it was done. The Civil Rights Movement, the feminist movement of the 1920s, in which women were able to gain the right to vote. So things like this can happen. And especially one organization that's fighting to do so, which is wolf-pac.org, in which they are fighting to create a new amendment that would remove money from politics completely and allow for more publicly funded elections. And some might say, well, this is impossible. On the contrary, other countries have done it. It's been successful in countries like Canada, in the Netherlands, and even here in the state of Vermont, in which they tried it and were actually fairly successful. Many of the people felt like they can vote again and have their voices heard. This is important to keep our election system clean and free from large elites and other unions and corporations from spending so much money in them to even out the playing field. The famous quote, government for the people, by the people. Let's not make it for the money, by the money. And so today, just to wrap it up, I talked about how the effects of Citizens United can affect us today and our children and their children in the future. Gave some context as to what some of the causes and effects were of this case, and offered up a solution. So yeah, I hope everyone took away something more meaningful from this and were able to learn from it. We need to change our election system and make it cleaner, remove all the dark money, all the political contributions from these huge companies, and have a democracy that works for the people, not just for few. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.